Today on Network Africa, President Muhammadu Buhari responds to the British Prime Minister's comments about Nigeria being fantastically corrupt. Then Amnesty International sounds the alarm again on the situation in northeast Nigeria, describing Giwa Barracks as a place of death. Much later, the Egyptian government is accused of tightening the noose on press freedom in the country. Hello everyone, I am Amarachi Ubani. I'd like to welcome you again to the program. It's no longer news that UK Prime Minister David Cameron made some unguarded comments about Nigeria and Afghanistan being fantastically corrupt. What's news, however, is reactions that have followed in Britain. For instance, UK Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond has defended David Cameron, saying that the Prime Minister was only stating a fact. Mr. Cameron was also defended by ex-London Mayor Boris Johnson, who said people would find it refreshing he was speaking his mind. On her part, former Commonwealth Secretary-General Baroness Scotland said the furore was unfortunate, but that Mr. Cameron was not wrong to say corruption was an issue. President Muhammadu Buhari, however, is not interested in joining remarks. He just wants stolen monies returned, as explained by our presidential correspondent, Chukwuma Onekwusi, who's covering the Anti-Corruption Summit in the UK.
As a prelude to the main summit, over 70 senior government officials, civil society organizations, and members of the business community gather here at the Marlborough House for a conference tagged Tackling Corruption Together.
Mr. President, should Mr. Cameron apologise?
President Muhammadu Buhari joins them as the keynote speaker. He says under the rule of law, he will fight corruption even if his feathers have to be ruffled. He wants the repatriation of corrupt proceeds and calls for international anti-corruption infrastructure to trace and return stolen funds.
This evil practice is manifested in the plundering and stealing of public funds, which are then transferred abroad in secret accounts. I therefore call for the establishment of an international anti-corruption infrastructure that will monitor, trace, and facilitate the return of such assets to their countries of origin.
It turns out to be an interactive session, and many would want to know if the Nigerian president will demand an apology from the British Prime Minister over his sweeping statement about corruption in Nigeria.
No, I am not going to demand any apology from anybody. What I am demanding is the return of assets. I have already mentioned how Britain really led and how disgraceful one of the Nigerian executive was. He had to dress like a woman to leave Britain and leave behind his bank account and fixed assets, which Britain is prepared to hand over to us. This is what I'm asking for. What would I do with apology? I need something tangible.
The president's speech also elicited reactions from some prominent Nigerians at the conference.
Some of us will have wanted him to join issues with the British Prime Minister, Mr. David Cameron. But I think during the question and answer session, he was able to address that the insulting comment by Mr. Cameron.
It's very important for us to come together in a day like this, because the fight against corruption cannot be done by one person. Nobody has the monopoly of knowledge to fight corruption. So it is very, very necessary that we pull out our house in the same house, and then we fight together.
Speaker after speaker say that endemic corruption can be wiped out. According to them, corruption is man-made, and it is within man's capability to end it. Hence the gathering in London. Chukwuma Onwekusi in London for Channels Television News.
However, Transparency International has come to Nigeria's defense regarding the comments made by the British Prime Minister, saying that Britain is, quote, the world's big corruption problem. So here's a list of the world's most corrupt countries according to Transparency International's latest report. Nigeria is number 14 on the list, so we're not on the top 10. You have first Somalia and North Korea, who share first place, Afghanistan, Sudan, South Sudan and Angola sharing fourth place, Libya and Iraq sharing fifth place, Venezuela, Guinea-Bissau and Haiti in sixth, Yemen, Turkmenistan, Syria, Eritrea in seventh, and Uzbekistan in eighth, Zimbabwe, Cambodia and Burundi in ninth, Myanmar, DR Congo and Chad in 10th. So here's more on what Transparency International had to say on the matter.
Two-thirds of the world is affected by significant corruption. So yes, there are countries with fantastic levels of corruption, and some of them appear in the third world and in the poor part of our globe, but this would not happen with the complicit participation of the first world, developed countries, where that's all those monies. In the case of Nigeria, 40% of the population living in poverty, and $150 billion left the country through illicit flows. Where did that money go? It went to the United States. It came here for property and lavishly lives of those that are on the corrupt. So what we expect here is not pointing some countries or some people being corrupt, but to see and find what can we do together.
Transparency International in defense of Nigeria's position. Now, away from corruption issues to a more chilling story here on our soil, Amnesty International has revealed that 11 children under the age of 6, including 4 babies, are among 149 people who have died this year following their detention in horrendous conditions in the notorious Giwa Barracks Detention Center in Maiduguri, Nigeria. Evidence gathered through interviews with former detainees and eyewitnesses supported by video and photos shows many detainees may have died from disease, hunger, dehydration and gunshot wounds. Amnesty International believes that around 1,200 people are currently detained in Giwa Barracks in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. Many were arbitrarily rounded up during mass arrests, often with no evidence against them. Once inside the barracks, they're incarcerated without access to the outside world or trial. At least 120 of those detained are children. Let's get more of this story now. Joining us from London is Amnesty International's Daniel Eyre, who is the Nigeria researcher for the group. Daniel, thank you for joining us to discuss this grave matter. Kindly give us more details about Amnesty International's findings regarding this report.
Sure. As you said, we found that 149 people have died in Giwa Barracks during 2016. This represents a significant increase in the rate of deaths in Giwa Barracks compared with last year. And it's the first time that we've found that children, particularly children this young, who died in the barracks. It's really shocking to find children under the age of 6 years old dying in detention. And these deaths are as a result of truly horrific conditions in the barracks. We've spoken to former detainees who told us that they didn't get enough food or water, so much so that people were losing weight in the cells, and you could actually see the ribs of the detainees in the cells. They told us that instead of toilets, they had 2 buckets in the cells that they had to use, communal buckets, and they were only emptied once a day. So you can imagine, with more than 200 people in the cell, what that must have been like. And those cells were not washed, so people told us about lice infestations. And so disease was rife in the cells, and yet you didn't have adequate access to medical attention. And so this is why we believe these are the kind of conditions that led to the deaths of 149 people in just the first 4 months of this year.
The details you gave are quite graphic, Daniel. With the testimonies, how credible do you think they are? Because some of these people may have been there for legitimate crimes that they committed.
Sure. So what we always do at Amnesty International is we make sure that we never rely on one source alone. These are the testimonies of several independent witnesses. We spoke to more than 15 people for this report, and we also spoke to witnesses that saw all of the 149 bodies that were brought from the barracks. We also corroborated this by looking at videos and photographic evidence of the bodies of people that had died. And we also tried to take satellite imagery of the areas where, of the Maiduguri cemetery where people were buried. So we try and rely on as many different sources as possible. And we have to rely on witness testimony because we still haven't been allowed access to Giwa barracks. There are no independent monitors going there and writing public reports about what the conditions are like. In the same way, none of the people that died had any kind of autopsy or medical examination after their death. They were buried without their families being notified. And so there are just no safeguards around the detention in Giwa barracks. No one is brought to court, no one is allowed in, so it's really, when people are arrested, they disappear.
This is not the first time that Amnesty International has released reports, condemning the Nigerian military's behavior and, the treatment of prisoners and, what's going on in the Nigeria northeast. But over time, have you seen a positive response from the government concerning the reports that you have released? Not just a promise to investigate, but actual response to really looking into these problems?
So last year we released two reports, one about the crimes committed by Boko Haram and one about crimes committed by the Nigerian military. We had a very positive response at the time from President Buhari, who said that he would investigate our evidence and leave no stone unturned in doing so. Unfortunately, we haven't yet seen meaningful action taken to begin those investigations, and we're calling on the President to make good on his promise to investigate.
We do apologize. We seem to have lost contact there with Daniel He's with the Amnesty International. He's the Nigeria researcher for the group. When we come back after the break on Network Africa, the Egyptian government accused of tightening the noose on press freedom.